And the last Ohio State segment of the show today revolves around what I think is the most endearing and enduring tradition that Urban Meyer has given to Ohio State and has really stood up against a test that I didn't know it was going to pass. And that is the black stripe. The reason that we're doing the segment today is that we finally got news that an offensive lineman had lost his black stripe in Ian Moore. This is good because, A, we've always wanted to see the Ohio State line rise to the level of what it was in 2019 or even 2021 for that matter, and give us reason to believe they can pass block and they can run block. As much as we talk about the skill players, that offensive line is going to be the make or break point of Ohio State's season. It's really difficult to put that as a headline because offensive linemen don't really move the needle on this, but I think a black stripe being lost inside of a conversation around other black stripes being lost, especially at a place like Ohio State where the stars are always going to be skill players, is quite important. But it also reminds me that Ian Moore's losing his black stripe in 13 practices in to what is probably going to be the most important preseason camp for Ohio State in at least a decade, right? We're also looking at this from the standpoint of what Chip Kelly likes, because Chip Kelly got to say that Ian Moore had lost his black stripe. This is a former four-star recruit, and they're all blue-chip recruits when they come to Ohio State, with the exception of a few, and those are usually just misevaluations, like Chris Olave, who's a three-star recruit coming out of California, ends up being one of the great Ohio State receivers and first-round draft pick that we've seen in the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years. But it also allows for me to remind folks that Urban Meyer put the system in for which he wanted a physical, visual signifier of someone who was new to the program and someone who has something new to prove to the program. So in the age of the transfer portal, I think this tradition has taken on an entirely new life because it used to be true freshmen. You didn't really get transfers in there all that often, but when you did, they got a black stripe. We didn't really talk about it all that much, but now you got so much movement in the sport and you have so many new players that are going to be a part of your program year to year, giving them something to achieve and a way for the rest of the team to say, okay, we get to operate like this dude is one of us up until after he gets this thing removed. That's important, right? Because you get to point to that and say, no, he lost his black stripe. We will treat him as such. It also reminds me that true freshmen losing their stripes before upperclassmen who transfer is not necessarily an indicator of talent or success, but it don't hurt nobody's feelings none. And the way that I want to frame this is Will Howard, the starting quarterback for Ohio State going into week 1, lost his black stripe on March 30th after transferring from Kansas State, right? The same day, his center, Seth McLaughlin, lost his black stripe, and he was coming from Alabama, okay? March 26th, Quinshon Judkins, great tailback out of the SEC, had one of the great seasons by a freshman tailback since basically Herschel Walker, lost his black stripe March 26th. And then Caleb Downs, who I think is the best player on defense, period, today, lost his black stripe same day. But what is wild about the 2024 black stripe class, which is basically the, for lack of a better term, true freshman class, is that Jeremiah Smith lost his black stripe before anybody else. Lost his on March 21st. That is remarkable and ridiculous. And I keep saying, we're going to be talking about this dude and talking about this dude and talking about this dude and talking about this dude because he really is that important and that good. I think the way that I've tried to couch this is I ask people who are not normally in the business of doing what I do, which is talking, right? Talking season and whatnot. But they say we got guys that are the most guarded, even-keeled people in the world who are fangirling over this dude, which is another way of saying he can't be stopped. That is scary to think about because that secondary might be the best in all of college football. I don't know that it is the best. It is one of the best secondaries of all of college football. I'm going to look at Oklahoma's secondary, Notre Dame's secondary. I think both of those are really good and have the capacity to be really great. I think that you have the capacity to be really great in your secondary at Oregon. I think you have the capacity to be really great in your secondary at A&M and frankly, Ole Miss, if they can get a pass rush. But the point there is you have a true freshman who is 6'3", 218, that is playing like a pro. You have to find a way to get him on the football field. And more than that, you got 5-star wide receivers in his room that are going, that dude got to get on the field. Because he is making highlight reel catches over guys that probably get drafted in the first round of next year's NFL draft. It's different when we talk about that guy. And then, you take into account the rest of the class, Black Stripe class. You're talking about Julian Sayin losing his on April 8th. You're talking about Jalen McClain, a safety, losing his on August 7th. And then James Peoples on August 9th. Edric Houston on August 9th. Peyton Pierce on August 13th. And, of course, Ian Moore on August 15th. I tend to look at this and go, maybe there's something that we aren't actually able to see that might reveal itself later, or something we haven't heard about Jeremiah Smith that is also going to reveal itself later. But in that room where I know that there is super talent, like forget Emeka Buga for a second, because he's going to play. He is a captain. He is a leader, and he is one of your most dependable set of hands. You know what you have in him. Now think about what Mylan Graham can do. A guy that doesn't get talked about nearly enough at the national level, which is where I have the conversation, start the conversation. Carnell Tate, a dude that I thought was something like Jeremiah Smith, and while that dude can play every position at wide receiver because he knows everybody's job and he's versatile, they weren't talking about Carnell Tate like they're talking about this man. And then Brandon Ennis, right? Keep going down the line. It's almost as if we would rather see them throw the ball to these guys than run the ball, but then you remember Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are back there with James Peoples spelling them. And it's looking at Will Howard, and people aren't in on him, or they are. I'm all in on Will Howard because I think Will Howard is a better quarterback than Craig Krenzel, and Craig Krenzel won a national championship. And he ain't got to do all what he did at Kansas State. I wish he would, because I think that dude is farm boy Cam Newton, vanilla Cam Newton, ice baby Cam Newton. But I can't convince you of that until you watch him play. I say that he's the only guy that I've seen take his program past an undefeated one to win a conference championship. Right? The other one I think would be Caleb Downs, who plays safety, right, at Alabama. They did that against Georgia. But the quarterback position is different. And I think that's why I've been harping on his ability as a winner. And that's what you want at quarterback. That's the point to raise. The point to raise is you're bringing in a guy who knows how to win a championship at quarterback. They haven't had that at quarterback since 2019. 2020. Justin Fields, 2020. I'm thinking 2019 because I forget that they don't play Michigan, and that's not the conference championship. They actually play a conference championship. But you get my point here. C.J. Stroud couldn't get that done, right? Kyle McCord couldn't get that done. Maybe it's that pedigree. Maybe you have to have that pedigree now to win a conference championship. And thinking about Justin Fields, he hadn't won one at Georgia, but he didn't get a shot at Georgia either, right? That's a tangent all to itself. I realize Caleb Williams, but I still have so much faith in Justin Fields because, I think Justin's one of the great quarterbacks in the NFL. People just ain't giving it an opportunity to happen yet because he was making strides. But let's keep it about Ohio State and their black stripes for a little bit, because you know that I can go on a tangent, and I will. I think when we are absolutely sure about a player, that's the only time when I feel a little bit cagey, and there's nothing but sure around J.J. Smith. It's just everybody that I talk to is in line with the same conversation. He is him. We don't have one like him. I'm going, yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, and people are kind of cagey about that because they know what Marvin Harrison Jr. did. But essentially what he did was the same thing he did as a sophomore. He just did it by himself last year. And we recognize that as a Biletnikoff Award winner. Like, you could talk about Malik Neighbors or Brian Thompson or even Troy Franklin winning that award last year and probably would have been okay. But the way that we are talking about this dude is the reason I wanted to do the Black Stripe segment about Ian Moore. And I think you understand why now.